Right, war. What is war? And why do we have wars? Questions are often asked, much more often than we ask why is there peace. We tend to ask more, why are there wars? People die, homes are ruined, everything gets destroyed. There doesn't seem to be any sense to it. Well, that's all right, I mean, it's not hard to say, well, I wish we didn't have wars, but unfortunately we do. There's wars all over the place. So what causes wars? Well, wars are generally about politics. And politics is generally about power. Now, if you think politics is about looking after your neighbours and that, I think you need a reality check. But anyway, don't forget, I'm talking about politics. I'm not talking about politicians. Some politicians go into it to sort of help their community, but then they realise that they can't really help anybody unless they've got power. Without power, they're just mute. So they try and get power. And that's where things start to go wrong. I did recently a piece on climate change. And I reckon the cause of climate change was greed. So what about the greed of power? What about being greedy for power? That's when things lead to war. People who are greedy for power, just for its own sake, that's when we find war breaking out. So, how can we stop that happening? Well, I'm not saying that everybody is going to be greedy for power, and yet everybody is at some time at war. We get at war with ourselves. This is the saddest part, and this is mainly sort of what I want to talk about, is the war within ourselves, because we all feel at times that somebody's done us wrong, somebody's scammed us, somebody's been unfair, somebody's stabbed us in the back. And what do? Well, sometimes we can take action, actually go to war. We can try and bring them down. But usually what happens is, especially with these big organizations today that are ripping us off, and I'm not mentioning any names, though I could mention dozens and more. We don't do it because we realize that we don't have the power. We're not going to win. So we just put up with it. All right? So we're not at war. But does that mean that we're at peace? Certainly not. Certainly not. We still feel it within ourselves, the struggle, the frustration, the annoyance and the anger. And that anger, that frustration can spread out like any other war. It spreads beyond its borders, beyond ourselves, and it goes into our relationships. It affects the ones we love. Saying, always hurt the ones you love. because they're an easy target, but it affects not only our relationships, it affects our financial situation, it affects our living situation, it affects how clean our house is. Because we're not at war, but we're not at peace. And that is probably the worst kind of war, where we don't think that we're at war, but we're certainly not at peace. So how do we deal with that? I think that's important to deal with it because it affects so many people. Now, everywhere you look on the internet, YouTube and podcasts or whatever, they tell you to think nice thoughts, think quiet thoughts, focus on being thankful to God, spirits, whatever you believe in, thankful for your own life. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not criticizing that. But to me, it's a bit fluffy. You know, it doesn't hold much sort of clout with me because it's a bit out there, you know. It's okay. It's okay for, okay, I call them fluffy bunnies. But does it help anybody? I don't think so, really. Because you can't do it. You can't just stop having negative thoughts. You can't just stop being frustrated or being angry just by changing the way you think. But there is something that you can do. So this is my take on it. This is the way I would put it. Now that might be useful to you, I hope it is. But I think what we need to do is we need to stay centered. That's my little mantra. Stay centered. Now what does that mean? Well, I always think of it as, well, if you think about the glyph of the sun, which is a circle with a dot in the middle. So if you're not into glyphs of sun or astrology or anything like that, just think of a circle with a dot in the middle. Now you are that dot. And the circle is the outside world, or your perception of the outside world. It's not only your perception of the outside world, it's very often your perception of you. It is about your frustrations, about how you should be, how you think you should be, and how you are. Well, there's very often a difference in that. This is how I think I should be, and this is how I am. And I don't like it, so I get frustrated, and I say, well, that's got to stop. I've got to do something about that. Or what do? Do I go to war with myself? That's what we're all at. We're at war with ourselves. So, but if you're the dot at that center, you have like a buffer zone. You have a buffer zone to sort of quietly reflect on what's coming in from the other side of that circle. You have a chance to take note, to calmly reflect and reasonably respond. Now, if your dot is not in the center, if your dot is right up there at the edge of the circle, there's no buffer zone. you don't have that choice. Life hits you. And the only thing you can do then is to react. And that reaction causes problems. You become a warrior because life is attacking you. Not only life of people outside you, but your own perceptions. I mean, let's face it, everything that exists is actually just a perception. So it's your perceptions about what is happening. It's your perceptions about who you are. And it's anticipation of what's going to happen. These are the things that are on that circle, and these are the things that are hitting you. You need to pull back, stay centered, be the dot in the middle, not on the outside. When that is the case, then you are calm. You don't need to be in a reactionary state. You are responsible. Now, a lot of people say this, oh, you must be responsible for your own life. And what do they mean by that? Probably they get it all wrong, because that's like saying, well, it's your fault. No, we're not talking about blame. What we're saying is responsibility simply means the ability to respond. And when your little dot is in the center of that circle, you have the ability to respond. So you become responsible for your life. You don't have to be offended. You don't have to be upset. You don't have to be angry. These are all personal choices. Here's what I don't understand when people in this woke ideology that's around now, you have to be careful what you say in case you offend somebody. Well, no, I don't. If you get offended, that's your fault. That's what you've decided to do. You've decided to be offended by what I've said or done. It's not my fault. No, I'm not having it. You're responsible for your own life. And the only way you can do that is to be the dot in the center. To be centered, to center yourself. I don't know if that makes sense to you. I hope it does. But if you are like that, if you are centered, then what spreads out into your life is something totally different. Because whereas before, your war within yourself spread out to your relationships, to the environment around you, to your housing, to your finances, and to how clean your house is. Yes, I say this because I'm very ashamed of the state of my kitchen right now. So that's right, I am not perfect. Is that war? That's war with me because I'm ashamed with me. I shouldn't do that. I should just say, yeah, Keith, just go and clean the kitchen. What's wrong with that? You gotta be calm and you gotta be centered. That's all there is to it. I thought this was going to be complicated. But it's not, is it? It's not. Just stay centered and there'll be no more wars.